Before anything else, I need to be transparent with you. Nothing I share in this video is a substitute for the personalized guidance of your loved one's physician or care team. This content is educational, designed to make you a more informed, more attentive advocate. If you are seeing changes in an aging parent or family member that concern you, bring those concerns to a licensed medical professional. That is always the right first move. Now let's get into this. Most families don't miss the big moments. They don't miss the fall. They don't miss the diagnosis. They don't miss the call from the hospital. What families miss are the small ones. The Monday morning when Dad stopped returning phone calls and nobody said anything because he'd always been a little private. The Tuesday dinner when Mom pushed her plate away after 3 bites and said she just wasn't hungry, and everyone figured she was tired. The Sunday afternoon when Grandma fell asleep in her chair before dessert was even on the table, and the family laughed it off and said she'd had a long week. Those moments feel ordinary. They feel like just another Tuesday. But what the science now tells us, loudly and clearly, is that those quiet behavioral shifts are often the most powerful warning system that nature gives us, and most families are walking right past them. A landmark study published in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society found that 78% of adults aged 70 and older who passed away within 12 months had shown at least 3 observable behavioral or physical changes in the year prior to their death. 3 changes, not one catastrophic event, not a sudden collapse. 3 quiet, easy-to-miss shifts in the everyday texture of a person's life. Here is the single most important thing I want you to hold before we go any further. Knowing these signs is not a death sentence. It is the opposite. When you recognize these signals early, and I mean months early, you gain something that money cannot buy. You gain time. Time to get the right specialist involved. Time to reverse what is reversible. Time to improve quality of life in ways that are deeper and more lasting than most families realize is even possible. Today, I am walking you through the 5 most significant and most commonly overlooked signs that an elderly loved one may be entering a period of serious, accelerating decline. We are going from number 5 down to number 1, and I want you to stay all the way to sign number 1 too, because that is the sign most families dismiss as inevitable, and it is also the most treatable. There is real hope waiting at the end of this countdown. Before we get into it, if you are watching this right now because you are actively caring for an aging parent, a grandparent, or a friend, drop a comment below. Tell me what changes you have been noticing. You may describe something that helps another caregiver in this community recognize what they have been seeing too. That kind of connection, that shared awareness, is exactly why this channel exists. Let's go. Sign number 5 is what I call the invisible retreat, and it looks, on the surface, like nothing more than a preference for peace and quiet. Your parent stops coming to family gatherings as regularly. They stop initiating phone calls. When you visit, they seem content, even warm, sitting in silence. They aren't rude. They aren't angry. They're just less woven into the social fabric of their own life than they used to be. Most families tell themselves in that moment, she's just getting older. He's always been a bit of a homebody. They've earned their quiet. And that impulse, the impulse to be kind and patient, is beautiful. But it can also blind us to what the neuroscience is actually telling us. When the aging brain and immune system begin to lose their synchronized efficiency, one of the earliest casualties is the production and sensitivity to oxytocin and dopamine, the molecules that make human connection feel rewarding. Think of these as the social fuel your brain runs on. When that fuel supply starts to thin, social interaction stops feeling energizing in the way it once did. The brain, facing a tighter energy budget, quietly begins to deprioritize the considerable cognitive effort that genuine human connection requires. But here is where this becomes genuinely dangerous, because isolation is not just a symptom of biological decline, it is also an accelerant of it. The field of psychoneuroimmunology, which maps the direct communication pathways between our emotional state and our immune system, has established that chronic social isolation elevates cortisol, suppresses natural killer cell activity, and drives up systemic inflammation. In plain terms, being lonely doesn't just feel bad. It physically weakens the body's capacity to fight disease and repair itself. I think of a man named Harold, 74 years old, retired civil engineer, the kind of man who showed up to everything. After his wife passed, his children noticed he had quietly stopped attending their weekly Sunday dinners. He was polite on the phone, but the calls got shorter. He said he was fine, Within 6 months, his inflammatory markers had climbed significantly and his cognitive scores had declined. His daughter made a decision. She stopped asking Harold if he wanted to come to dinner and started asking Harold if he would teach her children woodworking, something he had done for 40 years. Within 3 months, he was calling them first. The action step here is simple, but it requires intention. Do not wait for your loved one to reach toward you. Create structured, purposeful invitations to connection, not pity visits, purposeful ones. Ask for their expertise, ask for their stories, give them a role that matters, because the antidote to the invisible retreat is being genuinely needed again, and that is something every family can offer starting today. Sign number 4 is the shrinking appetite. And I want you to pay close attention here because the numbers behind this are among the most sobering in all of gerontological research. An analysis in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that unintentional weight loss of just 5% of total body weight in an elderly person increases 12-month mortality risk by 33%. 5%. For a 160-pound person, that is 8 pounds now, weight that may be completely invisible under a winter sweater or a loose pair of slacks. What drives this? Clinicians call it the anorexia of aging, and it has nothing to do with the eating disorder associated with younger populations. What happens in the aging body is a cascade of simultaneous changes that quietly dismantle appetite from multiple directions at once. First, sensitivity to ghrelin, the body's primary hunger signaling hormone, decreases dramatically with age. The brain simply stops receiving the hunger alarm with the same urgency it once did. Second, the progressive decline of olfactory and taste receptors means that food that once brought genuine pleasure now arrives muted, like a song playing at a fraction of its original volume. Third, and this is the piece most families never hear about, anabolic resistance sets in. In a younger body, a moderate amount of dietary protein is sufficient to trigger the cellular repair and muscle maintenance cycle. In an older body, it takes significantly more protein to achieve the same outcome, and if that protein is not consistently arriving, the body quietly begins drawing down its own muscle tissue to meet baseline metabolic demands. The result is a loved one who is not just eating less, they are extracting less from what they do eat, and losing muscle faster than anything visible on the surface reveals. I have had patients whose families were convinced they were eating fine right up until a formal nutritional assessment told a completely different story. A woman I'll call Margaret, 71, lifelong home cook, had lost 11 pounds in 4 months before her daughter realized the portions had been getting smaller every visit. What can you do? Make food social again. Research consistently shows that communal eating increases caloric intake in elderly populations compared to eating alone. Experiment with calorie-dense, protein-rich foods that don't require large volumes. Greek yogurt, eggs, salmon, cottage cheese, protein-fortified soups. And talk to their physician to rule out the reversible causes, dental pain, medication side effects, depression, or slowed gastric motility. If the weight loss is unexplained, request a formal nutritional assessment. 8 pounds is not a small number. Don't let it quietly walk out the door. Sign number 3 is excessive daytime sleeping. And I need to draw a sharp line here before we go any further, because not all daytime sleep is a warning sign. A brief, refreshing afternoon nap, 20 to 30 minutes, after which your loved one wakes up alert and oriented and ready to talk. That is normal. That is actually beneficial for cognitive function and is well supported in the literature. What I am describing is something categorically different. I am describing a person who falls into deep, nearly unrousable sleep in the middle of a conversation, who sleeps through meals, who spends more of the waking day unconscious than awake, who seems in a very real sense to be conserving something, and that is precisely what is happening at a cellular level. The mitochondria, the tiny power-generating structures inside every cell in the human body, lose their efficiency progressively with age. Picture a power plant that once ran at full capacity beginning to reduce its output. When that internal energy supply tightens, the nervous system faces a genuine resource management problem. It cannot power all systems at full intensity simultaneously, so it begins to ration consciousness. Extended wakefulness becomes energetically expensive in a way it never was before. The result is the person you see sleeping through Sunday dinner. Before attributing this pattern to underlying decline, though, these treatable and fully reversible causes must be ruled out first. Hypothyroidism, iron deficiency anemia, untreated sleep apnea, blood sugar dysregulation, and several common blood pressure medications can all produce identical patterns of excessive daytime somnolence. Get blood work ordered, have their sleep quality evaluated, review the medication list carefully with the prescribing physician. If those possibilities are addressed and the pattern remains, understand what you are seeing, a system operating with very little reserve. The response is not to let it continue unopposed. Support mitochondrial function through consistent, gentle daily movement. Prioritize morning sunlight exposure to anchor their circadian clock, and examine what in their daily environment may be unnecessarily taxing a system that is already running tight. Sign number 2 is the one that, in 20 years of this work, I find the most quietly heartbreaking to witness. I call it horizon compression. It is the moment when the future, which used to stretch out in a person's mind like a wide open landscape, begins to shrink, and you see it first in language, then in behavior, and once you know what to listen for, it is unmistakable. Your loved one stops talking about next summer. They cancel a magazine subscription they have maintained for 20 years and don't replace it. They begin giving away objects that have always mattered to them, a watch, a piece of jewelry, a set of tools, without much explanation. Just a quiet certainty that someone else should have it now. They stop making plans, even casual ones. And when you suggest a future event, a trip, a holiday, a gathering, they smile, but there is a distance behind the smile. They're not sure they'll be there. Here is what is happening neurologically. Cerebral blood flow, the constant pressurized delivery of oxygenated blood to the brain's higher order regions, tends to decrease measurably with advancing age and vascular stress. The prefrontal cortex, which is the architecture responsible for future planning, abstract reasoning, and long-horizon imagination, is especially sensitive to this reduction. When that region operates with a diminished supply, the mind's capacity to envision and invest in a distant future naturally compresses toward the present. The horizon gets closer, not because the person is giving up, but because the brain's forward projection machinery is running with less fuel. There is also something deeply psychological and perhaps even ancient operating here. The mind may be doing something protective, narrowing its focus to the immediate, to the people in the room right now, because at some level it senses that the long horizon may not belong to it anymore. What you should not do is force cheerfulness over the top of this. Aggressive future planning, booking trips, making promises about next year, over the layer of what your loved one may be genuinely experiencing, can feel to them like not being seen. What you can do is meet them fully where they are. Have the legacy conversations. Ask them what they want people to know about their life. Ask about the moments they are most proud of, the decisions they would make again, the things they want to make sure are not forgotten. Invite them to record a voice message. Encourage them to write something down. This is not giving up on them. This is the deepest form of presence, and remarkably, it often gently extends the very horizon it honors. And now we arrive at number 1. The sign I want you to hold most carefully, not because it is the most dramatic, but because it is simultaneously the most measurable, the most scientifically predictive, and the most directly treatable. If there is one sign on this list that gives me the most hope when caught early, it is this one. It is the change in how your loved one walks. Maybe you have noticed the steps are shorter now. There is a shuffle where there used to be a confident stride. The stance has widened, feet further apart, seeking a broader base of balance. They reach for countertops and door frames in passing where they never used to. They pause, a noticeable, deliberate pause, before pushing up from a chair. And when you watch them move down a hallway, something about the rhythm is different. Something is being managed rather than simply lived. A landmark analysis published in the British Medical Journal confirmed what clinicians had long suspected. Walking speed is one of the single most powerful composite biomarkers of biological age that we have. A decrease of just 0.1 meters per second in walking pace, a change so incremental most families would never consciously register it, is associated with a 12% increase in mortality risk. The way a person walks is not just information about their legs, it is a simultaneous readout of their cardiovascular efficiency, their neurological integrity, their muscular reserve, and their balance architecture, all at once, in every single step. Two primary mechanisms drive this gait change. The first is sarcopenia, the progressive age-associated loss of skeletal muscle mass, and particularly the fast-twitch muscle fibers responsible for generating power and enabling quick, reactive movement. As those fibers thin, what was once an effortless, unconscious act of walking begins to require active management. The second is a decline in proprioception and vestibular tracking, the system through which your body knows precisely where it is in three-dimensional space at every moment. Think of it as your body's internal GPS slowing its refresh rate. The positional signals are arriving a fraction of a second slower than they used to, so the body responds rationally. It widens its stance, shortens its stride, and reaches for available surfaces, buying itself the margin for error that a slower feedback loop requires. There is also a medication-related contributor that is critically underdiagnosed: orthostatic hypotension. A rapid drop in blood pressure when a person transitions from sitting to standing causes sudden dizziness and instability that is a direct side effect of several commonly prescribed blood pressure medications. If the gait change appeared relatively quickly, or if it correlates with a medication adjustment, that conversation needs to happen with their prescribing physician without delay. I want to tell you about a patient I'll call Raymond, 77 years old, former high school coach, a man who had been physically active his entire adult life. His family brought him to my attention after noticing he had started what his granddaughter described as walking like he was on a boat. His gait evaluation confirmed early sarcopenia and measurable proprioceptive delay. Within 14 weeks of a supervised resistance and balance protocol, 14 weeks, Raymond's walking speed had improved, his balance scores had climbed, and his family reported he had stopped reaching for walls entirely. This sign is the one that gives me the most hope on this entire list. Supervised resistance training in adults in their 70s and 80s, even light resistance training, consistently and meaningfully improves gait speed, balance, fall risk, and functional independence. Physical therapy, balance-specific exercise protocols, and targeted home modifications can genuinely transform a person's trajectory. So if you see the shuffle, if you notice the grip on the railing, if the stride is shorter than it was a year ago, do not write it off as the inevitable math of aging. See it for what it actually is, a complex, intelligent system asking for help, and bring that help to your loved one's physician and a physical therapist as quickly as you can. Let me bring this home. 5 signs: social withdrawal, the shrinking appetite, excessive daytime sleeping, horizon compression, and a changing gait. They do not announce themselves loudly. They arrive quietly, over weeks and months, woven into the ordinary moments of everyday life, and that is precisely why so many families miss them until the window for meaningful intervention has narrowed. But you now have a different lens. You know that when your mother pushes her plate away, that is not just a preference. When your father grabs the door frame on the way to the kitchen, that is not just clumsiness. When your grandmother stops talking about next spring, that is not just contentment with the present. Those are not just moments, those are messages. And messages can be answered. The philosophy behind everything I do in this work is this: the goal of modern care is not simply to add years to a life. It is to add life, real, vibrant, connected, purposeful life, to those years. And that work, the work of noticing and intervening and showing up with equal parts information and love, that work is available to every person watching right now. Vitality and independence. In the final chapter of life are not gifts that arrive by accident. They are built, sign by sign, decision by decision, by families who knew what to look for. These signs exist on a spectrum. Caught early, many of them are genuinely reversible. The gait can improve, the appetite can return, the isolation can be bridged, the horizon can widen again. You are not powerless. You are exactly where you need to be. If this video gave you something useful today, a framework, a question to bring to a doctor, a conversation to start at Sunday dinner, I am asking you to share it. Share it with another adult child who is watching their parent change and doesn't know what they're seeing. Share it with a fellow caregiver who is doing this work alone. This kind of information changes outcomes when it reaches the right person at the right moment. You could be the reason it does. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is your moment. Every single week, this channel brings you evidence-based, deeply researched content on what modern science actually says about aging well, living well, and caring well for the people who matter most to you. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I'm Dr. David Thompson. I'll see you in the next video.